So the Kamala Harris and Tim Waltz campaign are having a really hard time reaching the male voters in this country, but I'm actually starting to think it's because they've never actually talked to one. Welcome to my channel, Outspoken Samantha. Be sure to hit the like button, make sure that you are subscribed, and that your notifications are turned on so that you never miss a conversation like the one we're about to have. So we know that the Kamala Harris campaign has really depended on the abortion-driven female voter to carry them over the finish line. That's been their bread and butter, and ultimately the only thing that they've really been counting on to win the presidency. However, once again, they seem to have overplayed their hand in that area, in one specific area, and now they're realizing that there's a whole section of the population that they actually might need support from in order to win. And of course, that would be the men of this country. And it's just not clear how they're going to do that, as they've spent the last several years talking about how toxic masculinity is, that they need to dismantle the patriarchy, and pretty much blaming men for all of the problems of society. So needless to say, this is a mountain that they are going to have to climb, and they only have a very short time in which they can do that. But the harder they try to appeal to men, it becomes abundantly clear that they have no idea how to gain the support of the 50% of the population who aren't primarily driven by their feelings. So the strategy appears to be to push this idea that they need to just reshape masculinity, and how they seem to want to approach that is to tell the men of this country that the traits that come naturally to them are still toxic, poisonous, and dangerous to women, and so they need to bring in their newly feminized men to try and tell these other men how to be real men now. Mind you, these are the same people who have put men in dresses at the head of some of these important organizations within their administration, and there's a vice presidential pick who is known for putting tampons in boys' bathrooms. But they are really going hard with this narrative of reshaping masculinity, and we have a clip of CNN trying to say as much, that Trump has the kind of masculinity that is bad, and Tim Waltz and Doug Emhoff are this new version and this new vision for who men should really try to aspire to be.
Particularly at a time, I think, on this campaign where we've got kind of two different views of masculinity. I mean, I think as women, perhaps, and I'm sure you've noticed that too, Jean, there's this kind of alpha retro view of masculinity that we're seeing from the Trump campaign. And then you've got Tim Walz and Doug Emhoff, who are both professional men, but are in sort of supportive roles of a woman who's the principal candidate. And how they are, and he said something very interesting. He said, look, you can't scold people. You can't tell them you should be more supportive of women and women candidates, and that's going to help everybody. But he hopes that by leading by example, by talking about the fact that he loves his wife, that you can make space for women to rise to the top, and it doesn't diminish your masculinity.
Speaking of men taking on a more supportive role of women, it's worth adding in here that Doug Emhoff is facing a whole slew of allegations right now, from cheating on his first wife with the kid's nanny, impregnating said nanny, and also hiring unqualified models to work in his law firm just because they were nice to look at. So make that make sense. And shockingly, this total lack of awareness that seems to run rampant within the Democrat Party hasn't stopped the media from trying to push this guy out as this shining example of manhood. And we've got a clip of Jen Psaki working overtime, trying to tear those reservations down and let guys know that this guy knows how to be a man.
An interesting part of how people have talked about your role here is how your role has reshaped the perception of masculinity. And I'm not sure you planned on that, but you are an incredibly supportive spouse. Has that been an evolution for you? And do you think that's part of the role you might play as first gentleman?
It's funny. I've started to think a lot about this. I've always been like this. My dad was like this. And to me, it's the
And then there's Tim Jazz Hands Waltz, who seems like he should be on a cheer squad and would be more comfortable doing that than being under the hood of a car. But again, this is somebody who the Democrats are trying to trot out there as an example to how men should be, despite the fact that we can't get this man to stop behaving like this. But still, the Democrat branding team has tried desperately to steer away from the thing that is so obvious to most of us, that Tim Waltz is nowhere near the epitome of masculinity, but they've gone completely over the edge, saying that this guy is so masculine and even the most masculine men are afraid of Tim Waltz's manliness. Apparently, legends have been written about the level of this man's testosterone. In this article from Bloomberg UK, it says Tim Waltz's masculinity is terrifying to Republicans. I don't think a truer statement has ever been said, but it says Kamala Harris's running mate has traditional manly man traits. He's also not frightened of women, afraid of Black people, or terrified of the future. So you can feel the desperation in their marketing. They have been pulling these stunts for weeks, trying to reshape masculinity and trying to get men to disconnect from their carburetors and their oil-soaked mechanic hands and come out from under the woodwork and come out from behind their log cabins and just take a minute from rolling in the dirt to realize that it's okay to support women and that they don't have to be afraid of women and they don't have to be afraid of women in leadership roles. But what this is showing us is that I don't think they've ever talked to a guy that is actually secure in their masculinity. And I honestly think they're also sweating the fact that they haven't feminized enough of the male population, because when it comes to trying to get the attention of guys who would never wear a dress or fight for the right of men to have tampons in their bathroom, they have no idea what to do. They know they're losing the male vote, but because men cannot be manipulated by their emotions, which is how they've gotten so much of the female vote, they're throwing everything at the wall and praying that something is going to stick. And unfortunately, the most recent ad campaign that they have come up with is more meme worthy than it is anything else. And it's not going to do anything but inspire men to laugh at them. So this is the ad that they came out with called the Man Enough ad. And let's just have a watch.
I'm a man.
I'm a man.
I'm a man, man.
And I'm man enough.
I'm man enough to enjoy a barrel-proof bourbon.
Neat.
Man enough to cook my steak rare.
Man enough to deadlift 500, then braid the out of my daughter's hair.
You think I'm afraid to rebuild a carburetor? I eat carburetors for breakfast. I ain't afraid of bears.
That's what bear hugs are for.
I'll tell you another thing I sure as shit am not afraid of. Women.
I'm not afraid of women.
I'm not afraid of women.
They want to control their bodies? I say go for it.
They want to use IVF to start a family? I'm not afraid of families.
They want to be childless cat ladies?
Have all the cats you want.
Woman wants to be president? Well, I hope she has the guts to look me right in the eye and accept my full-throated endorsement. Because I'm man enough to support women.
Man enough to know what kind of donuts I like.
Man enough to admit I'm lost, even when I refuse to ask for directions. Man enough to not ban young women from reading Little Women. Or one of those pants books that the sisters like. I'm man enough to raw dog a flight. It sucked. Not worth it.
I'm man enough to be emotional in front of my wife.
In front of my kids.
In front of my horse. I'm man enough to tell you that I cry at Love Actually. Good Will Hunting.
West Side Story.
That and Predator.
And I'm sick of so-called men domineering, belittling, and controlling women just so they can feel more powerful. That's not how my mama raised me. I love women. I love women who support their families.
Women who decide not to have families.
Women who take charge.
And I'm man enough to help them win.
First of all, when this guy says that he's not scared of women, I don't know if scared is the right word. And there's no man that sits like that and eats the steak raw. So obviously the question is, how many stereotypes can you fit into one ad, where apparently they think that all men are wearing cowboy hats, lifting weights, and fixing cars. And it's so weird. Like, they felt like they needed to reassure men that it's okay to be those things as long as they get out of the way for women. But ultimately, there's a few things that I don't get. First, I don't understand how you square the idea that supposedly men are afraid of women and also want to control them at the same time. Secondly, that men not wanting to see their own offspring die or be killed is out of a desire to control women. I mean, in the ad, they spend the whole time driving home the fact that real men have emotion. And therefore, if you can acknowledge that a man has enough emotion in his body to cry during the movie Love Actually, or enough care for his daughter to braid her hair, then it's easy to conclude that he might not be in favor of abortion because he actually loves his child. And third, I think it's extremely ridiculous to push the idea that the only way men can be supportive of women is to step out of the way completely. What they're really driving home is that women are the ones that need to be domineering and belittling towards men in order for them to feel powerful. And honestly, to me, this just demonstrates how little these people think of their voters voters in general, because they truly think that there is no depth to us peasants at all. Because not only has the Democrat Party spent the entire time pandering to women about the issue of abortion, now they're pandering to men on that same issue, as if the majority of this country doesn't have like 9,000 other things to be concerned about right now. But this is their idea of connecting to men, identify all of these surface level traits that, again, they have been spending years telling us make men absolutely toxic, but tell them it's okay to be those things as long as you can cry and as long as you're okay with your partner or your spouse killing your unborn child. But we don't have to speculate about the intention of this ad because it's all laid out right here. Per this post, it says the Man Enough ad is real, created by Jacob Reed, formerly of Funny or Die and Jimmy Kimmel. It's not an official campaign ad, but it generally is trying to communicate to men why they should vote for Kamala Harris. It says, I think this resonates with people because it's a view of masculinity we see in our lives, but is rarely reflected in the media, especially when some of the loudest voices on the subject are the most insecure and bombastic. That's definitely a jab towards Trump and probably JD Vance. Our friends, family, and neighbors are complex men. They can change a tire and enjoy a rom-com, chug a beer and run to the store to get tampons for their wives and daughters. The strongest men are the most secure in their masculinity. With the rise of role models like Tim Waltz and Doug Emhoff on the national stage, I think the left is finally finding its footing on how to talk about masculinity. I think we're overdue for a redefinition of what it means to be a man in America, and I hope they start to reshape that conversation. So guys, you can let me know in the comments, did this ad actually resonate with you? Did it make you want to scrape the cow poop off your boots and grab a tampon and vote for Kamala Harris? I honestly think that men should be just as insulted by this as I think women should be when the Democrats only talk to us about killing our unborn babies. They consistently demonstrate to us that they have no idea what actually matters to everyday people and that we're a lot more deep than they actually think that we are. I also think that men are deeply, deeply stressed about what's going on in this country because as providers, it's almost impossible for men to feel like they can do the things that they naturally want to do for society because everything is spiraling out of control. Also, we have more men being taken down by drug overdoses than ever before. Men are facing the possibility of being pulled into a war, and more men are dealing with mental health issues, depression, and stress than ever before. But Democrats seem to think that if they just put out a couple of paid actors hanging out in the gym and telling you it's okay for your girlfriend or spouse to kill your unborn child, that they're really appealing to our priorities. And it really is so belittling. It's funny to watch, easy to mock, but it's equally as infuriating at the same time. But I would love to hear all of your thoughts on this in the comments below. Please be sure to hit that like button. Make sure that you are subscribed. Keep it real, guys, and I will see you in the next one.